All right, good day, class. Today we are going to be covering the following topics about teaching aquatics. We will be covering some aquatic information, some teaching strategies, and then also some student organization informations that you can utilize within the pool environment. So, what are our goals for this class? By the end of this lecture, you should understand and be able to utilize proper aquatic equipment, understand and apply various teaching strategies within specific swim skills, aquatic skills, and then examine formations and organization skills that can be used when teaching aquatic and swim skills within the pool environment as well. So most of this information is coming from those supplemental documents that are on Blackboard. So if you have not yet downloaded them or looked at them or read them, please make sure you do so, because when it comes to the final exam and potentially a quiz, there will be questions about those pieces of information. So let's get going with aquatic equipment. So we've utilized some aquatic equipment. As we move and shift into actual stroke development, that's when we will be using a bunch more pieces of more specialized equipment than the typical toys that we've been using for our basic swim skills. So noodles and barbells, kind of up here is a barbell, noodles down here. Very good use for practicing kicking and also being able to enhance breath control and swim strokes as well. Then we have our kickboards, which we've utilized for helping maintain buoyancy and floating, but we will be using the kickboards more so to practice our different kicks as we move forward with the swim strokes. We also have fins that we're going to be wearing on our feet to be able to promote proper form when kicking. And then also down here is swim paddles, or also considered resistance gloves, that are going to help teach you how to catch the water when doing arm strokes. Then we also have what's considered a pull buoy in the upper right, or leg float. So this is actually to help get you in horizontal position for when performing a swim stroke, and also to kind of break down the body and cut off the legs as far as not needing to be able to kick and really focusing on your arm stroke for the different swim skills. We also have flotation belts, personal flotation devices, and life jackets. We will be utilizing some flotation belts when we do some swim strokes, but also more so in the deep end when we cover some fitness principles of utilizing the pool to work on fitness, cardiovascular strength, and muscular strength. There's also snorkels and goggles. Snorkels is really good if you're swimming for a long distance. You can maintain your breath control with keeping your head in the water. And then goggles for sure is a must in these upcoming weeks, since we will be transitioning into our swim strokes. And then also the lane lines, we've talked about them before. Also, in the field of aquatic, there is some adapted aquatic equipment as well that's very well utilized for teaching and instructing swim skills to students or individuals with disabilities. So they are head support and stabilizers, such as this yellow flotation device, primarily used for students with disabilities that do not have the ability to right themselves, meaning to roll over onto a back float and be able to bring their mouth and nose out of the water to be able to breathe. So that's a big safety concern, and we want to make sure that we are providing them support, that if they're independent in the water, that they are keeping their head above water to be able to maintain that breath. Also, some individuals might have a reflex response where depending on noise or if they're touch, they have a tonic reflex, which then actually puts their face in the water, and therefore if that is a reflex, that we would want to utilize some sort of head support or stabilizer to make sure that their head doesn't go underwater. The other thing, which is really good for teaching individuals with disabilities some swim skills and floating, especially those that have defense to tactile or proprioception sensory input, is using a large mat or a mesh support. So being able to have the individual be independent within the pool environment and have the support of either the mesh or the mat to give them a break from just sensory touch. Because if they weren't in either of these two pieces of equipment, an instructor like yourself would then have to be holding them and supporting their body. And then we talked already about a ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act accessible pool lift, or potentially a ramp as well to be able to access the pool environment through a PVC wheelchair. All right, so now getting more so into actual teaching strategies when it comes to teaching aquatics, which will hopefully help all of you in your first lesson next Friday, and then definitely looking forward to lesson plan 2 and teaching your lesson on swim strokes. So on Blackboard, there's a document about teaching strategies for swim strokes and the aquatic environment, so make sure you read that through. There's a few factors that you want to identify and examine when planning a lesson in the aquatic environment or when teaching and instructing aquatic skills. One is, what is the concept or skill that is being taught, and what are the actual objectives that you want your students to learn within that lesson. And part of that is making sure that your participants have a concept of readiness and are able and willing to learn that skill. And so lots of teaching within the aquatic environment is very progressive, and it's really difficult to start teaching a swim stroke if they're not able to get in a horizontal position and put their face in the water. So there's a lot of progression that you want to make sure that you are portraying as you move through your unit plan for aquatics and instruction of swim skills. The other thing is you need to know where is the current motor skill level of your students. So what's their present level of performance? Where are they at with their swim skills to be able to then know what's the next step to progress their swim skills and also their ability to obtain swim strokes. Other thing you have to consider is, what's the number of students? How many teachers are there? Are there any paraeducators? Do any of those students have disabilities? What is the actual environment that you're teaching in? What is the depth of the pool? If it's deeper than your students can stand, what are some additional supports that need to be in place? How much time is needed to practice that specific skill? And then you have to look within that. If you practice too long, then boredom sets in, and then you lose attentive, and then they get off task. What's the amount of feedback that you need to provide? What type of feedback should you be providing? Is it visual feedback with a demonstration? Is it auditory feedback, verbal feedback? Is it tactile supports and touch feedback? And then after you do your lesson, you have to reevaluate your students' performance to check, did learning actually occur? Throughout your lesson, you should be checking for understanding. You should be asking questions pertaining to the topic so that you're checking that the students are understanding the concepts and the skills that you're instructing. And linking back to motor development, your TI and E factors. What are factors relevant to that task? What do they need to be ready to do? What are the elements of the task that you're teaching? What about the individuals, the I? Who is in your class? What is their age? What's their maturity level? What's their attention span? Then the E, what about the environment that you're teaching in? So the individuals we cannot really change. We can change and adapt and modify the task and environment to then make the environment and the instruction the best for the individuals within our class. Moving forward, talking more about teaching strategies, but those for students with disabilities, which is a document on Blackboard labeled Chapter 6. What are some things we need to utilize? And this really can go for just your typical class of students, but primarily for those with disabilities, we want to make sure that we are matching that participant to a specific aquatic program. And we'll talk a little bit more about what does that program consist of. The other thing about the participant is as an individual, you need to understand their constraints and their factors. So you need to learn about their disability that they have. Do they have any seizures? What is their head control and their ability to right themselves and be able to breathe? What about their breathing? Do they have full bladder and bowel control? What medications are they possibly taking? What is their typical behaviors? What are things that reinforce positive or appropriate behaviors? What are things that need to be done if they're showing inappropriate behaviors within the pool environment? What is their preferred mode of communication? How do they communicate? How do they express communication? And then also, what's their best way for receiving communication? Is it auditory, visual, tactile? And then if they have service animals as well, clearly they're not going to be getting in the pool with them. So what is the best situation or location for those service animals? The other thing you want to check is what is their prior experience in the water? Prior experience with swim lessons. Was it a positive experience? Or maybe not so much a positive experience? That's going to provide you some great information. Now, when we link back to the first bullet, how to match the participant to the program, you may have to adapt or modify to meet the participant. So, adapting the class size, decreasing the amount of students within your class, increasing the instructor ratio. Maybe there's a paraeducator coming along with that student with a disability, and maybe that paraeducator needs to actually get into the pool with that student. Or maybe they can just sit on the edge of the pool and provide additional feedback, redirection, and information to that student. Again, what's the environment needed? The size, the depth of the pool. Where are they entering the pool from? And maybe if they enter at one side of the pool and they have to walk or swim to the other side of the pool just for your lesson, they might be fatigued by the time they get there and you haven't even started the lesson. Use a board for pictures and written information. Provide those different modes of communication and providing additional resources for instruction and information. You may need to individualize your instruction based off of the unique needs of that student. Adapt skills as needed, provide supports as needed. If it's not needed, don't assume, fade those supports out, because the goal of any aquatic program is for them to be able to independently perform the skills safely and successfully within the aquatic environment. And make sure that you set up a routine and maintain that routine throughout your lessons within the aquatic environment. And as always, you have to evaluate progress and make sure that this is the proper placement for them. If they're not progressing and they're not showing a safe attitude and progressing their skills, being successful, then the placement or program may need to change. So, what are some teaching styles when it comes to the aquatic environment? Hopefully you've seen these teaching styles before. They are really teaching styles that can be used in any instructional environment. But the same goes for the pool and the aquatic environment as well. So there's two different types. There's reproductive direct styles, which is very teacher driven. And then there's productive or indirect styles, which are very student driven. So within your lesson plan, you're going to be writing down what is your actual teaching style. Primarily, we feel very comfortable, and especially because of safety concerns within the pool, that we usually focus a lot on command and practice or task teaching styles, but there are opportunities to use some guided discovery and more student-driven styles where students really explore with what is best. For instance, when I gave you the option in different float positions, I didn't tell you or direct you to what I thought was best. You actually had to use some guided discovery to figure out with your body types and with your buoyancy and your ability to balance, what type of body position worked best for you when it came to floating on your front or your back. And so we move through direct style, starting at command, moving through to inclusion, and then that shifts to more productive indirect, starting with guided discovery and moving through. So direct teaching strategies. I provide you with some, so hopefully you have a little bit of knowledge on them. Really, what we typically do is we explain, we demonstrate, and then we give time for practice. That's probably that command practice task direct teaching style that's most utilized within the aquatic environment. But we also need to make sure that we are specific in the demonstration, the feedback that we're providing, what the desired outcome is of that performance skill, and to make sure that we are getting a level of understanding and that the student knows and can apply the knowledge we're giving them. Demonstrations should be at an appropriate mature level. They should be slow and emphasized, and we need to make sure that all students are able to view the demonstration. A breakdown of a skill or a task analysis may need to be provided. Like I said before, we might need to split the body, focus on the legs first, and then focus on the upper body. Task setting is really you assign a task, and then it can be achieved in various ways. So I could say, okay, we're going to do 4 laps of kicking, and you can decide how you're going to do that. So it could be a flutter kick, a dolphin kick, it could be a breaststroke kick, it could be kicking on your front, kicking on your back. So the task is really to work on kicking, but then it can be achieved in many different ways. Reciprocal or partner practice is really when we're doing some peer teaching, so we're working in pairs. One individual is observing that performance and providing feedback, and then they learn together. So that might be like our floating the ducks with buoyancy and floating that we did, where we worked in pairs and we had to figure out buoyancy, assist them in rolling over from front to back, and really being able to identify and provide some visual for each of the students to be able to learn more about that task. All right. In addition, another direct teaching style is small group practice. So as an instructor, you set up the environment, you put them into a group or team. You then have one of the students perform, and then the other students are observers. You have to identify specific performance criteria that you want them to be working on, and then the rest of the observers can provide specific feedback. And so you're doing a little bit more than partner in the fact that you're having more than one person kind of view and provide feedback to each other. We'll be utilizing small group practice when we are working on our swim strokes. All right, now moving into indirect teaching strategies, which aren't used as much even within the physical education environment, but specifically within the aquatic environment, just because there is that safety aspect. So one kind of teaching strategy that's indirect, remember indirect is very student-led, is active exploration. So you kind of provide an open-ended kind of teaching, and then you use questions to try to get the students to respond in a way that's going to lead them to the correct movement or the correct response. So that you could definitely be used for when talking about the rules of the pool or proper ways to enter or exit. You can just provide kind of that open-ended question and then continue to ask them questions that's going to lead them to the correct answer. Guided discovery usually is a series of tasks or challenges that the students then have to figure out a solution for. For guided discovery, usually the solutions and the findings are pretty predictable. So you may set up, an obstacle course with hula hoops to be able to streamline through, and they might need to figure out what is the best way to move through that obstacle course. Problem solving is also very much used in indirect teaching strategies, so using that higher order of thinking. So it's combining that active exploration and discovery, providing them with different scenarios that they then have to problem solve and think about what is the best solution for that. As kind of the students develop their own answers, you may need to modify or adapt the activity to guide them into the correct response that you are looking for. So moving on to formations and organizations that should be utilized within the pool environment. Really, depending on what the task is, the number of students, the number of instructors or paraeducators or assistants that you have, the facility size and depth of the water all really help to determine what is the formation or organization that you're going to use. Also, you have to think about your swim levels of all of your participants as well. So What I've used a lot is the line formation, and I've had you either be stomachs to the wall or backs to the wall up against the edge, and I'm kind of standing out in front of you, either on the deck or in the middle of the pool. And you can utilize that one often. The next one, if we actually had a corner in our pool compared to a curve, you could use the L formation. Nice thing about the L formation is it provides better vision for all students to be able to see the instructor. And you can set it up to where very close to where you are within that corner is going to be your lower level students that need more support. They would also be traveling out to you the shortest distance, and you are closest to them if need be to provide support. You would then set up your more advanced swimmers to the outer edge of the L, and as you kind of back up, they're going to be actually swimming the furthest or performing the skill the furthest. So you're really differentiating your teaching and instruction and the task through utilizing this L formation. The issue with that is within our pool, it's very difficult to do that because we don't have an actual discrete corner. We have those curves. Next thing would be a perpendicular formation. So that could be in the water, out of the water, where one kind of student is performing that skill, and then they could rotate back into the back of the line. The next person performs that skill, rotates back. This is a good formation if you're doing assessment so that you're able to watch one student at a time and keep them organized. Or if you're having them perform a skill that may be at a higher risk that you do not want all students to be performing that skill at the same time. Some additional kind of setups for organization, more so used within different drills or different practice, is one, there's two different. So there's static drills and practice, and then fluid and dynamic. So static is when your students are performing that skill within one place. They're not actually moving through the space. So one of the best ways to do some of that static practice is having them bracketed on the pool wall. So holding onto the pool wall with two hands, one hand, but maintaining their hand against the wall or on top of the ledge. Or you can have them be in personal space and spread throughout the pool, but performing it static. And we've done lots of practice with being bracketed on the pool wall, sitting on the pool wall, and also using personal space. And that's a good formation when starting off with basic kind of aquatic skills. As we move on to swim strokes, we're going to be using more of a fluid or dynamic formation in which now you are traveling as you're performing that skill. And when doing that, there's three different formations you can use. You can use the wave formation. So we did that in our pre-assessment when group 1 goes through, then group 2, group 3, group 4, and they're all spread out. So that one's up here, kind of having one group go through, then the next. You can do a staggered formation. So being able to kind of send one person off at a time and then stagger them down. That provides you a little bit more time and to provide some feedback as everyone's completing it. And then also circle formation, we'll be using this when we start swimming laps. And that's just really allowing nice fluid dynamic movement and keeping everyone moving within a lane. It's also considered circle swimming as well. All right, so hopefully from this lecture, if we revisit the goals for the class, you've learned about different pieces of aquatic equipment and how we're going to be utilizing them when we move forward into swim strokes. You've learned about different teaching strategies and what are things to consider when teaching aquatic skills within the pool. And we also covered different formations and organization skills that can be utilized when instructing both basic swim skills and also swim strokes. So hopefully you all watch this. I'm excited to see all of your swim lessons next Friday. Please remember that you can utilize the pool this Friday for 2 hours to practice your lesson plan. Use your equipment, set it up so that you're ready to go the following Friday. We're going to get right into our lessons when we get into the pool and kind of transition throughout everybody to make sure everyone has an equal amount of time for teaching. So next Friday we will meet for lecture. We will start covering kind of kicking and sculling, the essence of beginning our swim strokes. and then head to the pool and complete your lesson plan 1. Also, do not forget, not only is your lesson plan number 1 written lesson plan due and needs to be submitted to Blackboard, but also your YouTube assignment. So make sure you check out the YouTube assignment on the syllabus and submit your Word document to Blackboard. All right. Hope you guys all have a great Friday, great weekend, and I will see you next Friday.